Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you might be. My name is Kevin Michael Grace, and this is the KMG Show. The great Austrian satirist Karl Kraus once wrote, "How is the world ruled and led to war? Diplomats lie to journalists and believe these lies when they see them in print." That's exactly what Russiagate was, the Russia hoax. And we have the facts now. We have a great many of the facts. And upon reading them, I thought, why are none of these people in prison? How is it possible that none of these people are in prison for sedition or treason? This is from the conservative Treehouse today. CBS News' Catherine Herridge has obtained a 94-page spreadsheet showing dates of media reports, dates of Steele reports on the same material, and the FBI effort to verify or validate the circular process. In essence, this is evidence of the process we initially shared almost 3 years ago, only now we know the names. Former SSCI staffer Dan Jones, former Wall Street Journal reporter Glenn Simpson, and Simpson's crew at Fusion GPS pitched and planted phony Trump-Russia evidence with the media and simultaneously gave those fake points to Chris Steele to supplement the dossier. Using the same method of Ezra Klein's journalist replication, Dan Jones and Fusion GPS paid the journalists to run the stories. Steele then used the same information from Jones and Fusion in his dossier and cited the planted media reports as evidence to substantiate. The dossier is then provided to the FBI. The journalists then provide indulgences to the FBI as part of the collaboration. The FBI, specifically Lisa Page, Peter Strzok, and Public Information Officer Mike Corton, then leak the outcomes of the FBI dossier investigative processes to the same media that have reported on the originating material. It's all a big circle of planting and laundering the same originating false material, aka a wrap-up smear. Michael Isikoff highlighted the level of how enmeshed media is with the Fusion team in February 2018, when he admitted that his reporting was being used by the DOJ and FBI to advance the political objectives of the intelligence community. Additionally, FBI investigator Peter Strzok and FBI attorney Lisa Page were shown in their text messages to be leaking stories from the Clinton investigation, the Trump investigation, and the Mueller investigation to journalists at Politico, the Wall Street Journal, and Washington Post. FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe was busted by the Inspector General leaking stories to the media and then lying about it. FBI Director James Comey admitted to leaking stories to the New York Times and even hired his friend Andrew Richman off the books, gave him access to FBI and NSA databases, and then leaked information to Richman along with another friend, Benjamin Witz at Lawfare blog. Lest we forget, the IG report and how the FBI handled the Clinton investigation revealed that dozens of FBI officials were actually taking bribes from the media for information. From the Inspector General's report, we identified numerous FBI employees at all levels of the organization and with no official reason to be in contact with the media, who were nevertheless in frequent contact with reporters. Attached to this report is attachments E and F, or two link charts that reflect the volume of communications that we identified between FBI employees and media representatives in April, May, and October of 2016. We have profound concerns about the volume and extent of unauthorized media contacts by FBI personnel that we have uncovered during our review. We do not believe that the problems with the FBI's policy, which we found to be clear and unambiguous. Rather, we concluded that these leaks highlight the need to change what appears to be a cultural attitude among many in the organization. Madness. This is an IG fact-based criticism of the institution of the FBI, not simply a few rogue officials within it. But wait, perspective. Later, it was revealed that Andrew Weissman's, Robert Mueller's #1 special counsel prosecutor, was coordinating investigative efforts with the full support of 4 AP reporters who were giving Weissman tips. That's information from journalists to use in his court filings and submitted search warrants. Make sure you grasp this. The Associated Press journalists were feeding information to their ideological allies within the special counsel. Nuts, simply, well, nuts. And then there's Devlin Barrett, Lisa Page, and Peter Strzok. Additionally, Christopher Steele has stated in UK court records the person in charge of the Clinton campaign's opposition research firm, Glenn Simpson from Fusion GPS, arranged and coordinated for Steele to talk to several journalists at CNN, the New York Times, the Washington Post, Yahoo News, and Mother Jones, while Steele was also the primary source of information for the FBI investigators, including Strzok and Page. Make sure you read that full response from Christopher Steele above to see the scope of the media engagements he was conducting. As more evidence surfaces, the relationship between journalist Fusion GPS, Chris Steele, and the media's Department of Justice FBI sources begins blending together. The FBI was using media reports, which were based on Fusion GPS pitches, to bolster its investigative documents to the FISA court. It is an intelligence laundry operation. Steele was suspended and then terminated as an FBI source for what the FBI defines as the most serious of violations, an unauthorized disclosure to the media of his relationship with the FBI in an October 30th, 2016 Mother Jones article by David Korn. Steele should have been terminated for his previous undisclosed contacts with Yahoo and other outlets in September before the Page application was submitted to the FISC in October, but Steele improperly concealed from and lied to the FBI about those contacts. According to UK records, Christopher Steele reports his September 2016 meeting with Isikoff was arranged by Glenn Simpson. According to Isikoff, on his February podcast, he met Christopher Steele at a Washington, D.C. hotel in September 2016. They were joined by his old friend, Glenn Simpson, the founder of opposition research firm Fusion GPS, who Isikoff now defines as a private investigator. So Christopher Steele was meeting with journalists. The journalists were writing articles the FBI was leaking to the media and simultaneously citing those same articles as underlying evidence to support their counterintelligence investigations, and all of this was used to validate the investigative documents the FBI was receiving from Christopher Steele, who, along with the leaking FBI officials, was also the source of the media articles. This is a circle of information, all coming from Dan Jones at Glenn Simpson at Fusion GPS, who was the opposition research firm being financed by Hillary Clinton, along with FBI officials who were using their own strategic leaks to validate their own investigation. Think about the scale of the reporting and reporting on reporting of anonymous leaks, false leaks, lies from people with knowledge of the matter, government officials involved in the matter, people familiar with the matter, government sources, etc., all going in one unified and semi-coordinated direction against the aggregate Trump administration. Now it actually gets even more complicated. Christopher Steele has sworn under oath that he met with multiple journalists, at least 8 organizations, in September, mid-October, and late October 2016 at Fusion's instruction. Overlay upon that sworn admission with what Glenn Simpson told the House Intelligence Committee, while also under oath about his involvement in sharing information derived from Christopher Steele. FBI Director James Comey admits to leaking his memos to the New York Times. FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe was busted for leaking and lying about it. FBI number 2 counterintelligence agent Peter Strzok and FBI attorney Lisa Page are caught in their text messages leaking to Politico, the Wall Street Journal, and the Washington Post. And the FBI is caught in at least one FISA application using Yahoo media reports provided by them and their investigative source, Christopher Steele, to establish a basis for FISA Title I surveillance, the most intrusive and wide-open search and surveillance authority possible. The Clinton campaign is paying Fusion GPS to conduct opposition research against Donald Trump. In addition to the collaboration between Jones, Simpson pushed that opposition research into the media, and Fusion GPS is also providing that opposition research, including information from contacts with media directly to the FBI. Let's see, during this same time period, Deputy Attorney General Bruce Orr's wife was employed by Fusion GPS to assist in the cultivation of opposition research on Trump. or later provided the FBI with all of his wife's opposition research, paid for by the Democratic National Committee and Clinton campaign via Fusion GPS. The Orr's relationship with Steele and Fusion GPS was inexplicably concealed from the FISC. Tell me, how can the media possibly write about this now? The problem is not just corruption within the US justice system, the DOJ and the FBI. The problem is corruption within the media. We're talking about thousands of hours of media TV pundits, thousands more columns written, and almost every scintilla of it based on originating intelligence sources from the larger intelligence system that are now being exposed as duplicitous and conspiratorial in the scale of their malicious intent. This larger storyline has traveled in one direction. The narrative has only traveled in one direction, each thread converging on codependent trails for collective stories, all going in one direction. One big engineered narrative endlessly pushed. Think about how far the collective media have traveled with this story over the past 18 months. Hell, 20-something journalists were so committed to the resistance narrative that they were sleeping with their sources to get any little engineering angle possible. And yes, the head of intelligence security, James Wolfe, was sleeping with New York Times reporter Ali Watkins. And I guess he was a very useful source to her. You know, Donald Trump has called the media the enemy of the people. And I think that Russiagate proves that this is not an exaggeration to any extent. We've heard a lot of this word reckoning this year. And I really think that after November the 3rd, if Trump wins, which I believe he will, we're going to see several reckonings. We see reckonings in the FBI, in the DOJ, the CIA, all of these alphabet agencies, and also in the media themselves. They pretend to be objective. They are essentially agents, sometimes paid agents, of the Democratic Party. And again, there's no other way to describe this. Conspiracy. Oh, everyone's worried about conspiracy theories. Well, what is Russiagate, if not the greatest conspiracy of the 21st century? And again, seems rather remarkable to me that no one, certainly no one important, has gone to jail over this. Here's another conspiracy, which turns out to be, well, real. This is a story from Breitbart. An organization of radical left-wing activists has posted an online guide to disruption that outlines a plan to shut down the country and force President Donald Trump from power in the event that the 2020 election is too close to call. The guide, Stopping the Coup, is available as a Google Doc, and it's being circulated by a group called Shut Down DC. It casts its plan for disruption as a response to an imagined coup by the president in the case of a close election. In an email promoting the guide, Shut Down DC declares, President Donald Trump, from stealing the election and remaining in office, is likely to take mass, sustained disruptive movements all over the country. The guide is a manual to that disruption. Parts of the guide are committed to ensuring a, quote, fair election, unquote. Parts of it, however, read like a manual for staging a coup rather than a guide to preventing one, quote. In the context of a coup or highly contested election, we need to be clear that our actions must directly affect the structures and pillars of power. Our largest asset in this regard utilizes the ideas of noncompliance through massive, broad-based direct action. Where we can, we need to be in the streets, on the highways, or at the sites of power and power holders. If our jobs and lives, we must refuse to allow those taking control the legitimacy of the power they seek through strikes, slowdowns, and boycotts, and public refusal to accept an illegitimate ruling party. In order to really win, we will need to force some pillars of power, business, military, media, or other major institutions, to decide to side with the people, or at least get out of the way. If everyday life goes on, a despot will not leave power, and so there will be no incentive for real systems change. You want to think about it, what might take to stop business as usual. The signal for action will be if President Donald Trump is declared the winner on election night. Trump may try to declare himself the victor before the votes are counted, or Fox News might call the race. Those who can should be prepared to take action against those who are feeding into the stolen election narrative, including social media companies that are letting falsehoods or incitements to violence spread. Well, you remember we heard last week that Twitter has declared that it will not allow anyone to say our guys won unless two creditable media organizations say call the election for Donald Trump. And perhaps Fox News might, but the others, ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, MSNBC, not a chance. Not a chance. And remember that that Joe Biden has been advised by the Clintons, no less, not to concede under any circumstances. So I think we know where this is going. Let's see. Let's look at the chat. KMG had a message on Twitter about an hour before showtime saying that, oh, yeah, I didn't do a show yesterday. Something came up. Sorry about that. I didn't know you were taking Columbus Day off. Yes, Cristobal Colon. You see that Joe Biden was not celebrating Columbus Day. He was celebrating indigenous peoples, whatever. Because apparently Christopher Columbus is now too controversial for the nominee of the Democratic Party for president. Hope all is well, says MCT. Reasonably well. Chogokin 666, I went to the hospital today. They made me wear a mask on top of my own mask because my mask has a vent on it. Again, you know, the parallels between the COVID-19 hysteria and the AIDS hysteria, they're very strong. I remember hearing from 1980s people saying, oh, one condom isn't enough. You need two, or maybe even more than that. And I thought, what's the point? What's the point? Matt Beck said the election will be decided on November 3rd and Trump will win. No protests, no court fights. James Carville said that the results will be known by 10:30 on Tuesday evening. He's expecting Biden to win. I don't really know how that's possible, given that Biden supporters are supposed to be, you know, mailing in their ballots, which has led to a whole host of nude videos, because apparently mailing in these ballots requires following instructions. And if you don't follow the instructions, your vote doesn't count. But, let's see. Joe Biden was in, Toledo, Ohio, or someplace close to Toledo, Ohio. Do you know that Joe Biden has not really been saying where his events are? It's all sort of up there in the air somewhere. And of course, no one shows up. No one shows up to these events. How is it possible that you have a man who's supposedly 10 or more points ahead in the polls, and literally a couple dozen people will see his campaign appearances? Jim Kunstler wrote yesterday, something even stranger and more sinister than the COVID-19 virus is creeping across the USA. Joe Biden's Flying Dutchman campaign, which, like the ghost ship of legend, plies the vasty electoral seas with a skeleton crew and no hope of ever landing. Late last week, the candidate blew into Yuma, Arizona for a rare joint appearance with Veep partner Kamala Harris. And guess what? Absolutely no civilians, i.e. voters, showed up at the event, though the local TV news had publicized it. Weird? A little bit? Face it, we're living in the days of fantastic high-tech information mischief. Virtually all of the traditional news media, plus the powerful new social media, plus the news media of foreign lands, and scores of other embeds in the federal bureaucracy are behind the story that old white Joe and his understudy, Ms. Harris, are way ahead in the polls. Do you ask yourself, as I must, whether this is all a gigantic psyop? And why would it be? All right, I know that many readers are cross-eyed to the point of nausea over the Barr-Durham investigation, especially the failure to deliver indictments before the election. The complete absence of leaks from that outfit has been crazy making itself for many. But I take that as a sign of the profound seriousness of the investigation. Durham's crew is methodically making a case for the worst and largest seditious conspiracy in U.S. history. It requires the most extreme care. They are not going to blow it by allowing any suspicion that is being used as a campaign ploy on behalf of Trump. Sometime after the election and before the 20th of January, a great big hammer is going to come down on the people who organized the Russiagate op and many of its spin-offs. As the late Tom Petty observed, the waiting is the hardest part, and not only for those in the counter-resistance who have already connected the felonious dots based on publicly available documents, but also for the targets of the Barr-Durham Russiagate probe, the Resistance itself, the long log of Obama admin officials, Clinton campaign minions, and even senators who worked to prevent Trump's election by foul means, and then tried to disable and overthrow him when it didn't work in order to cover up their criminal culpability. You understand that the targets of Barr and Durham are almost all lawyers, Democratic Party connected lawyers, that is. And so what they are doing in the shadows of Joe Biden's ghost campaign is attempting to mount a last-ditch lawyer's assault on their antagonists who have regained control of a rogue Justice Department, thus lawfare. If Russiagate was the most dastardly crime of government against itself ever in U.S. history, then the final result will be the most awful roundup and prosecution of disgraced former officials ever seen in the history of the world's great nations. Criminal liability may even extend into the news media itself, though they may only be named as unindicted co-conspirators. Thus, too, the unanimity in the news media on not reporting the documents lately declassified by Director of National Intelligence John Ratcliffe and his predecessor Rick Grenell. What had been a slow dribble of documents zealously protected by seditionists still in office, namely CIA Chief and FBI Director Christopher Wray, is becoming a torrent of incriminating information as is finally pried from their hands. The real story is getting out there into the public realm by other means, despite the attempts to suppress it, and none of it is coming from Barr and Durham. Their work constructing a difficult case goes on independent of those declassified releases. It is driving the resistance batshit crazy. Hence, all the noise emanating from lawfare circles about the monumental legal battle to come over the mail-in vote. So high are the stakes, so many careers possibly broken and celebrated figures sent to trial, maybe even prison, that the Democratic Party's lawfare gang will dare to confound the resolution of a presidential election and disrupt a 200-plus year history of orderly government. They will mount scores of lawsuits in every swing state against its slate of electors in an effort to thwart an electoral college vote scheduled for December 14th. They won't care whether they turn the USA into a failed state. They just desperately want to get their friends and colleagues off the hook. All this is why the Biden-Harris campaign is such a dispirited fiasco. They don't matter. Their only policy is to front for a lawyer network aimed at protecting its members at any cost. Their aim is to hijack what's left of America's legal system in order to destroy it. They went public with the scheme in the so-called Transition Integrity Project and the war game it ran over the summer. That scenario seemed feasible up to the sudden death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. The confirmation of Amy Coney Barrett to the Supreme Court will change the odds of that scheme greatly against them, and they know it. Joe Biden just can't stop lying about his own life. Apparently, he was one of the great civil rights icons of the 20th century. This is from the Washington Free Beacon. On the campaign trail, Joe Biden has talked frequently about his early years in the civil rights movement. As a teenager, he says, he regularly attended a black church in Wilmington, Delaware, where he was involved in organizing anti-segregation protests in the early 1960s. I got raised in the black church, Biden said in a speech to Jesse Jackson's Rainbow Push Coalition last year. We would go sit in Reverend Herring's church, sit there before we'd go out and try to change things when I was a kid in college and high school. I guess he's going to, retcon this like he was a regular Greta Thunberg of civil rights, maybe involved in, grade school. The church Biden referenced, the Union Baptist Church, was a prominent African-American church in Wilmington run by the Reverend Otis Herring, an acclaimed pastor who passed away in 1996. But Biden has made comments that seem to contradict the account. When reporters questioned Biden's claim in 1987 that he marched in the civil rights movement, he acknowledged that he wasn't an activist and that his most significant experience with civil rights as a youth was he worked at a majority black swimming pool as a college sophomore in 1962. And of course, he ran into corn pop. Rusty razors were involved. Now, interviews with longtime church members are raising questions about the story. Biden befriended Herring as an adult, they say, but they do not recall him attending the church as a teenager. Isn't Joe Biden supposed to be a really devout Roman Catholic? If that's the case, why would he be attending a Baptist church? That doesn't make any sense. The Biden campaign did not respond to a request for comment. Now, here's my favorite. In February, Biden repeatedly told the story of getting arrested while trying to visit Nelson Mandela in South Africa in the late 1970s. But the campaign later acknowledged that this was not true. Following New York Times report that challenged the claim, Andrew Young, a United Nations ambassador who traveled with Biden to South Africa, told the Times, "I was never arrested, and I don't think Biden was either." This very strongly suggests that Joe Biden was non-compos mentis going back to February of this year, or else he thinks that we're all idiots. Does he believe that it'd be possible that a national American senator and the UN ambassador would be arrested in a foreign country, and this would not be front page news? That this would not lead all of the news reports until such time as they were released? Could he possibly have believed that? See, John Nolte writes at Breitbart, "The polls look terrible, awful. President Trump is down nationally by an average of 10 points, and unlike 2016, these polls aren't as volatile. But unlike 2016, we're only 3 weeks out and the polls are not closing. Joe Biden's lead is expanding. Biden's also over 50%, 52% to be precise. Hillary couldn't hit 50. Things are a little better for Trump in the swing states, a little. Biden's up an average of 4.8 points, and he's nudging right up against 50%, and his lead is currently expanding. But on this day in 2016, Hillary was up 5.1 points in the swing states. So in the states, and it's the states who decides who's president, Trump is doing a little better in the polling than he was in 2016. Still, as far as the numbers, it not only looks like Trump is about to get fired, it looks like he's about to be humiliated by a blue wave of rejection that will give Democrats full control of the federal government. So why doesn't it feel that way? This isn't my first rodeo. In 1984, 1988, 1992, 1996, 2008, and 2012, I watched my guy lose. I know what it feels like to watch your guy lose. This doesn't feel like that. Want to know the difference between those years and this one? During those years, everything, and I mean everything, pointed to a loss. That's just not the case this year. Like 2016, there's a lot of data points that make you doubt the polls. You can argue I'm in a bubble. Well, even if I am, it's the same bubble I was in 2008 and in 2012. It's not all feelings. The thing I can't get over is the difference between this, and this is pictures of video of Trump's rally in Sanford, California. His first rally since being infected with COVID-19. Crowd is not socially distanced and lots of people with no masks. And yes, look at the huge crowd for Biden in Pennsylvania, which of course is his native state. And there's no people. And there's that stupid slogan, "Build Back Better." And what a bunch of people sitting in their circles. Weak. Was it 30,000 vehicles showed up in Miami for a Hispanics for Trump rally? Remarkable. It's not an exaggeration to say Trump rallies look like rock concerts while Biden rallies look like family funerals in the age of the coronavirus. Had you told me a year ago Biden would generate less enthusiasm than Hillary, I would have laughed in your face. But it's true. The examples are endless and without exception. Also in the department, if it's not just about the fields, the Washington Examiner's Byron York compiled a list of data sets that tell us the polls could once again be wrong. It's not a small thing that 56% of registered voters in a recent Gallup poll say, despite the coronavirus, they are better off now than they were when Trump took office. Only 45% said that in 2012 when Barack Obama was reelected. Only 47% said that in 2004 when George W. Bush was reelected. Only 44% said that in 1984 when Ronald Reagan was reelected. Is it possible the hidden Trump vote is real? That Trump voters hang up or lie to pollsters? Republicans are also winning the new voter registration battle in battleground states, and not by a slim margin. Yes, get out the vote. The Trump campaign has decided to make this their number one priority. And it's true enough. Trump looks like he's having a good time out there in on the hustings. Oh, we got some breaking news here. Megan Thee Stallion has an essay in the New York Times. Yeah, that's right. I'll get to that a little later. But I just, okay, so we have a New York Times op-ed by a twerker who calls herself Megan Thee Stallion, and she complains about how she was shot in the foot by a man called Tory Lanez, aka Argentina Fargo. Yeah, I'll be getting to that in a little while. It's just, it's too funny. So this was the second day of Amy Coney Barrett's appearance before the Senate. From the Daily Mail, I'm not a pawn. Amy Coney Barrett clashes with Democrats as they press her to recuse herself from election cases and says she will set aside Catholic faith to rule fairly, and brushes off demands to say if she'd overturn Obamacare and Roe v. Wade. She would not commit to recusing herself from cases involving the presidential election, Affordable Care Act, or Roe v. Wade, and said she would not express view on precedent of Roe v. Wade one way or the other. From what I saw, she gave a good account of herself, because it's irritating that she has to justify herself as a Roman Catholic. I don't recall Jewish members of the court having to do the same thing. Let's go to J5 Killer, see what he has to say. He's very bullish on Trump. An attractive, fit woman appears in the public eye, and Al Franken emerges from the perv cave to breathe heavily into the microphone. Yes. Retweeting Jason B. It's clear them Dems aren't planning on the voters helping them win the election. Up to 17 points in recent polling. The enthusiasm is off the charts for this dynamic man of the future, the hero America needs, the inspiration of millions, Joe Cricket Sounds Biden. And again, what am I looking at here? How is it possible, even if Biden were behind in the polls, how is it possible for the Democratic nominee for president to show up in public and nobody comes to see him? What a strange year this has been. I'm going to talk about Tucker Carlson because he made a joke last week and Canadians got very, very upset. Canadians don't much like jokes these days. They're very sensitive, too sensitive, I'd say. But before, I'm going to go back to the chat before we go there. Deborah says Joe will be like, oh, you can stay home now. You voted enough. Did you say essay or essay? Yeah, okay. Peter Levy or Levi says election will come down Midwest, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan. I guess this is a reference to Kamala Harris, Ann Run. She has an annoying voice and does have crazy eyes. I saw part of her testimony before the Senate, which was done remotely. It was just down the hall. And she was reading from a teleprompter, unlike Amy Coney Barrett, who was speaking without notes. Kamala Harris has this thing that's called vocal fry. It is exceedingly annoying. And she just, I don't know. No one tell her that her voice was horrible, that she could maybe do something about it. Or this inappropriate smiling. You know, oh, I'm just so sassy. Patrick Leahy literally asked Barrett not to rule in favor of Trump in a contested election. Yeah, okay. Dingo Tamer says KMG should play Dr. Brian Oblivion in the Videodrome reboot. Don't tell me they're going to make remake Videodrome. Brian Oblivion was obviously a riff on famous Torontoite Marshall McLuhan. Actually, McLuhan was born in Edmonton and raised in Winnipeg, but he ended up at the University of Toronto. And of course, David Cronenberg, who made Videodrome, is from Toronto as well. She is an attractive woman, but her voice is grating. That would be Amy Coney Barrett. She has this little girl voice. We see the same thing with Canada's Minister of Finance with the little girl voice. And of course, what was that? Christine Blasey Ford with the little girl voice. Visionary Companion has a comment about Kamala, which I'm not going to repeat. Shogokin666 says, I hate sass. Very anti-sass. I just, it's disconcerting. How old is this woman? She's about 51 years old or something. And she's acting like a teenager or a girl in her 20s. It's not dignified. Not dignified. Matt Beck says, I practiced the Chinese virus kata in Shaolin Temple after the monks adopted me. Head McNeck says, I went to a gas station yesterday to use the men's room. Joe Biden was in there giving a campaign speech to Juan, the toilet cleaner. Because Biden supporters are terrified of the China virus, says Ann Run. I think there's an awful lot of truth to that. They're terrified. They're terrified of dying. So how many of them are going to stay home and not vote? I wonder. It's pretty exciting, isn't it? In any event, Tucker Carlson was talking about Ottawa. And Canadians on social media, according to CTV News, were quick to accuse a U.S. news anchor of putting the wrong emphasis on the wrong syllable Friday night when he referenced Ottawa. But he was closer to the truth than some realized. In a Friday segment on the Fox News program, Tucker Carlson Tonight, the anchor and political commentator said Democratic vice presidential nominee Kamala Harris, who went to high school in Montreal, was at sea when it comes to Abraham Lincoln-era Supreme Court history, but could probably identify the capital of Canada. For the record, it's a place called Ottawa, Carlson said, stressing the second syllable instead of the first, which would have been the typical Canadian pronunciation. Twitter users lit up the site after American reporter Andrew Feinberg posted the clip, calling it very odd. Ottawa what now? Wrote one Twitter user. How do we get him to say Saskatchewan? Asked another. But several Indigenous Canadians pointed out that Carlson was actually saying the word correctly, or at least closer to its Indigenous origins, which over time were anglicized in spelling and pronunciation. The word Ottawa comes from, they not even try to pronounce whatever this is. Okay, Ojibwe. I know Ojibwe, which means to sell or to trade in reference to a trading hub or to traders themselves. Over time, it became anglicized and mispronounced because people weren't always cognizant of the sounds that we make. So it became Ottawa. So Jeff Monag, an Ojibwe language expert in the capital city, which sits in Algonquin territory. No, actually, it sits in Canadian or Ontario territory. Though some thought the host may have done so unknowingly, Montague, I guess that's what it is, told CTV News on Saturday that he didn't think that it was unintentional, though it's unlikely Carlson knows the history of the word. I'm sure he's being flippant, Montague said over the phone, noting another clip posted online showing Carlson in 2014 using the anglicized pronunciation of the city. The Ojibwe pronunciation isn't well known across Canada. The institution of residential schools, I'm not even going to finish that. But I was thinking about this on Friday night because I'm greatly amused when I see people who should know better, let's say people in the news business, meat puppets. They will say Ottawa. That's not how it's pronounced. There are no two hard T's. Of course, they do the same thing in Washington State with Seattle. That's not how it's pronounced. Or another one of my favorites, Oregon. Nope. The natives call it Oregon. Of course, my first reaction was when Carlson, people let me know that he was doing a bit. But my first reaction was, okay, let's see some Canadians pronounce M-I-N-O-T, North Dakota, or P-I-E-R-R-E, South Dakota. Years ago, I took a Greyhound trip from Seattle to New York City, and of course passed through North Dakota, and I was curious about this city of Minot, or so I called it, because it's a French word, pronounced in the French way. No, it is not. They pronounce it Minot, which was it took me aback, you know. Also, when I learned that what I thought would obviously be pronounced Pierre is pronounced Pier. Well, we were talking about this last week or the week before, that cities, they get their own names, and they're pronounced in ways which are not, how would you say, official? My adoptive grandfather, who was a Torontonian, he had great fun with people who would say Toronto, and that's not how people there say it. I was born in Toronto, didn't live there for long, but my grandfather said that the middle position was to say Tirana, but then the real Torontonians just called it Trana. It's like that, Trana. But again, you see these prissy people on the news, and I guess they don't want to be accused of what? Being plebeian in their pronunciation. Here's another story from Breitbart, and how long is this going to keep up? Seattle Seahawks radio broadcaster suspended after transphobic tweet. It went a very short period to, I don't know, tolerating these people, and then we were told that we must worship them. And that's where we are now. This is from Warner Todd Houston. Seattle Seahawks pregame radio broadcaster Dory Monson was suspended Friday after team management was alerted to an allegedly transphobic tweet he posted on Wednesday. Monson posted the political-themed tweet during the Wednesday evening debate between Washington Democrat Governor Jay Inslee and GOP challenger Lauren Culp, the Seattle Times reported. During the debate, Monson, who also hosts an afternoon show on Cairo Radio, live tweeted his reactions to what was said on stage, much of which was critical of Inslee's claims and positions. But one tweet especially raised eyebrows. The broadcaster took a swipe at Inslee, saying, quote, "Inslee, we follow science in Washington, the state where I could go to Olympia tomorrow and change my birth certificate to say I was a girl. on 10/2/61. Ha 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 ha. Both the Seahawks and Bonneville, Seattle, which owns both Cairo FM and AM, found the tweet to be transphobic. After fans pointed out Monson's tweet to the Seahawks, the team suspended him on Friday. Bonneville took the same action immediately afterward. Neither entity made a public comment about the incident. Yeah, so Bruce Jenner was he was a woman in 1976 when he won the men's decathlon. Because that would have been really impressive. Really, really impressive. But again, you just see how, I am woman, hear me roar, feminism, yeah. And the men told the women to just shut up, that we get to decide who women are, and there's nothing you can do about it. And you don't want to be one of those TERFs, because justice will be meted out to you. They make no secret of the violent threats against the so-called TERF, trans exclusionary radical feminists. Brave women, they are. I was talking about a reckoning with the media, and this is a very strange story. So a TV station in Denver hires a Pinkerton guard. The Pinkertons have a very dark reputation in American history because they were hired by union busters, and they went so far as to kill them, to kill unionists at Carnegie's factory and other places, shooting them. But now we have this exceedingly strange story. From several angles. Facebook censors Benghazi veteran John Tegan after Denver rally. And there's illustrated with a picture of Mark Zuckerberg, who seriously looks more inhuman with each passing day. This is from Alan Bakari. Facebook has reportedly disabled the account of former U.S. Marine Corps Sergeant John Tegan, one of the men who helped defend the U.S. consulate in Benghazi in 2012, now a conservative activist and public speaker. Tegan is known for his role in defense of the U.S. consulate in Benghazi while he was working for Annex Security, a private security company. Tegan and others helped defend the embassy in defiance of a stand-down order, fending off attacks by radical Islamist terrorists while embassy staff were evacuated. The fact that no U.S. troops were sent to relieve the embassy became one of the standout scandals of the Obama administration. Tegan shared a picture on his Twitter page showing a message from Facebook informing him that his account is disabled. According to that message, he was told that it did not follow our community standards. The censorship occurred after Tegan and others organized a Patriot Muster, a gathering of conservative activists in the city of Denver. At the rally, Lee Keltner was allegedly shot and killed by Matthew Robert Doloff, who is now under investigation for first-degree murder. Video and photos from the event show Doloff opening fire as Keltner, holding up a can of pepper spray, was backing away. Early reports described Doloff as a security guard contracted to 9 News, a story supported by the news station, but officials in Denver say that Doloff was not licensed to work as armed security in the city. That is deeply strange. This is from News 19. Concealed carry permit for suspect in Denver shooting suspended Monday, authorities confirm. Matthew Doloff was being held Sunday without bail on suspicion of first-degree murder following the shooting that left 1 man dead. The victim, Lee Keltner, was 49 years old. The suspect, Doloff, is 30, was contracted through the company Pinkerton by 9 News. It's been the practice of 9 News for a number of months to contract private security to accompany staff at protests. Denver police said in a tweet that Doloff was acting in a professional capacity as an armed security guard. Pinkerton, however, said it does not actually employ Doloff. Pinkerton did not share the name of the company for which Doloff worked. Pinkerton on Monday released the following statement via its Facebook page. We take loss of life in any situation very seriously, and our hearts go out to those impacted by the situation. As it relates to the incident in Denver on October 10th, the agent in question is not a Pinkerton employee, but rather a contractor agent from a long-standing industry vendor. So let's talk about COVID-19. It's an interesting story from Revolver here. Top German lawyer wants COVID panic perpetrators tried for crimes against humanity. A top German trial lawyer has called for COVID fraud perpetrators jailed for probably the greatest crime against humanity ever committed. Dr. Reiniger Füllmich is a lawyer known for corruption trials against Deutsche Bank and Volkswagen. According to BitChute, for 26 years, he has been a lawyer in Germany and California. He's one of the 4 members of the German Corona Investigative Committee. In this video from October 3rd, he describes how there is no legal doubt about the possibility of a class action lawsuit against those responsible for the lockdowns. Basically, he argues that the pharmaceutical companies have an interest in perpetrating COVID panic because they are raking in record profits from healthcare supplies, tests, vaccines, etc. And here's a tweet from Plushy. A positive PCR test result may signal nothing else other than a person's immune system has won a battle with a common cold in the past. Please listen to the rest of this. A German lawyer from the Corona Investigative Committee explains. This is from John Kirby. Professor, author, and inventor David E. Martin explains that not only did Moderna, the big COVID vax producer, make a patent application in March 2019, but also they were concerned for reemergence or deliberate release of a corona virus. And from John Kirby, Carrie Mullis, inventor and Nobel Prize winner of the PCR tests currently being used by the government to show people have COVID and thereby all deaths and case numbers lockdowns, debunks its use for viruses and other infectious diseases. I don't know, I think we may be dealing with what's known as the sunk cost fallacy here, that it's that simple, that having destroyed society, destroyed the economy, and erased civil rights, the politicians who have engaged in this are not, it'd be difficult for them to say, whoops, wow, we really overreacted there. So you heard about the new normal. Well, we're actually going to try to go back to the old normal. Sorry about that. Yes, we followed expert advice. An inquiry will place the blame where it belongs, which is, of course, are the words of the Interior Minister in Anthony Burgess's A Clockwork Orange. Here's a story from Zero Hedge via 21st Century Wire. This week, Sky News Australia contributor and former Australian Senator Cory Bernardi tore open the debate on COVID after calling out a globalist agenda, which few in mainstream media have dared to mention so far. Since lockdowns began in March 2020, few have challenged the government rationale for voluntarily imploding their economies and destroying communities and societies based on a guess that coronavirus might kill tens of millions of citizens. However, Bernardi believes that the COVID-19 pandemic hysteria is being used as a Trojan horse for a globalist agenda hatched out of the World Economic Forum in Davos. It's called the Great Reset, and it's designed by elite billionaires supposedly to bring about social and economic change. There's something unusual about the continuing pandemic claim, said Bernardi. Medical experts now acknowledge that lockdowns don't work. Now, none of that makes any sense until you open your mind to consider if there is another agenda at work. According to technocrat Klaus Schwab, founder and chairman of the World Economic Forum, quote, COVID-19 cases have shown us that our old systems are not fit anymore for the 21st century, that has laid bare a fundamental lack of social cohesion, fairness, inclusion, and equality. Now is the historical moment of time, not only to fight the virus, but to shape the system for the post-corona era. Schwab admits that COVID is the new excuse to usher in the Green New Deal that climate alarmists, profiteers, and big government have been pushing for years. Said Bernardi, think about it, the global response to COVID has been a green socialist dream. Bernardi cites the fact that coordinated government shutdown policies, not COVID, have brought down fuel consumption and canceled international travel and bankrupted scores of airlines and travel firms already. In addition, governments are using the pandemic to permanently curtail civil rights and freedom of movement and assembly. Why do you think the Australian Greens have been so quiet these past few months? It's because their policy agenda is coming to life. After decades of peddling climate change lies and propaganda to force government by the elites, the socialists have used a media-induced hysteria over public health as their latest weapon of economic destruction. You come across these stories every so often that it appears that more people are dying from drug overdoses now than are dying of COVID-19. And one would think that this would be a very big story, but I guess it doesn't really fit with the narrative. And of course, telling people, particularly young people, that the world has come to an end, essentially, and just forget about prosperity because that's not going to be in your future. Is it really surprising that we are getting so many ODs? Fraser Myers writes in Spike, why has Google censored the Great Barrington Declaration? As much of the world gears up for a second round of lockdowns and restrictions on everyday life grow ever tighter, a group of infectious disease epidemiologists and public health scientists have come together to propose an alternative. The Great Barrington Declaration was spearheaded by Martin Kulldorff from Harvard Medical School, Sunitra Gupta from Oxford University, and Jay Bhattacharya from Stanford University Medical School. The declaration was bound to cause controversy for going against the global political consensus, which holds that lockdowns are key to minimizing mortality from COVID-19. Instead, the signatories argue that young people who face minimal risk from the virus should be able to go about their lives unimpeded, while resources are devoted to protecting the most vulnerable. The lockdowns, they argue, have not only caused an intolerable amount of collateral damage, but have also contributed to a higher number of COVID deaths. But for making this argument, the declaration has been censored. Tech giant Google has decided that the view of these scientists should be covered up. Most users in English-speaking countries, when they Google Great Barrington Declaration, will not be directed to the declaration itself, but to articles that are critical of the declaration, and some that amount to little more than smears of the signatories. Among the top results, Google would prefer you to read is a hit piece from the ever-conspiratorial Byline Times, which insinuates the scientists have an ulterior shady motive for challenging lockdown. Google is also, for happy to you, read about pranksters signing up to the declaration using fake names like Dr. Johnny Bananas, as well as critical commentary from The Guardian and Wired. But it does not want you to read the declaration for yourself and make up your own mind. Censorship of the declaration has also spread to Reddit. The two most popular subreddits for discussions of the coronavirus, r COVID-19 and r coronavirus, have both removed links to the Great Barrington Declaration. The moderators of r coronavirus, a forum with 2.3 million members, have declared it to be spam. The censorship of alternative approaches to the coronavirus is shocking, but it is entirely predictable. Ever since COVID-19 arrived, the World Health Organization and governments across the world have been warning about an infodemic of COVID misinformation, and the tech giants have been all too willing to play a role in censoring anything that contradicts official advice, guidance, and policy. This might make sense in relation to scam artists selling quack COVID cures, but the main casualty of big tech's war on misinformation has been disagreement about how to interpret the COVID data and how governments should respond to the virus. One of the biggest offenders in this regard has been YouTube, which is owned by Google. Its campaign of censorship began with David Icke, who was spreading conspiracy theories connecting the virus to 5G. His videos were removed and his YouTube channel was deleted, but it didn't take long before scientists and mainstream journalists found themselves in the firing line. Censorship presents a serious problem for science. Science thrives in a climate of free speech and open disagreement, where testable propositions can be put forward and rebutted. Now we have the likes of Google deciding the correct science in advance. These tech firms then shield the public from anything that diverges from that view. But as more and more scientists warn against the dangers of lockdown, not only the Great Barrington scientists, but also representatives from the WHO and members of UK SAGE, categorizing dissent as misinformation will soon become untenable. There is so much at stake in the debate over lockdown. Whatever decisions we take will have enormous repercussions for life, liberty, health, and so much more. That a tech giant is using its considerable power to smother one side of the argument is nothing short of sinister. Oh, conspiracy theories. Yes, Bloomberg, very upset about conspiracy theories. What did I lead the show with today? Yes, Russiagate, which is a conspiracy, a monstrous, seditious conspiracy. But when we denounce conspiracy theories, let's not bring that one up, because that's kind of embarrassing. This is from Jackie Davalos. A majority of Americans believe unproven or debunked claims and viral conspiracies, according to a joint survey by the liberal think tank, the Center for American Progress, and the right-leaning American Enterprise Institute. The survey tested different conspiracy theories on politics, science, and public health to gauge whether demographic or partisan backgrounds are correlated to a higher likelihood of accepting or rejecting certain claims. Misinformation about COVID-19 is most pronounced among Republicans, with 48% believing that the disease is no more dangerous than the flu, and 42% saying that hydroxychloroquine, an anti-malarial drug championed by President Trump despite scientific misgivings, is a safe and effective treatment for the virus, survey data shows. 60% of Democrats believe Russia has compromising information about Trump, while roughly the same percentage of Republicans are convinced there has been a coordinated effort by unelected government officials to undermine the Trump administration. Is Bloomberg News seriously trying to tell us that there has not been a coordinated effort by unelected government officials to undermine the Trump administration? Less than half of those surveyed, 44%, said they'd be willing to get a no-cost FDA-approved vaccine to prevent COVID-19, a finding roughly equal among Democrats and Republicans. However, only 21% of Black Americans report that they would take it. The survey's findings underscore the indiscriminate impact of false or misleading information running rampant ahead of a contentious national election. The study also revealed a broad distrust of the government, drug companies, technology companies, and news organizations. Golly, I can't imagine why that would happen. American society faces a genuine crisis in public trust in government, corporations, and the media, exacerbated by wide partisan divides about who and what to believe, said John Halpin, senior fellow at the Center for American Progress. Despite heated national debate surrounding voter fraud, confidence of the voting process for the upcoming November 3rd election was relatively strong at 60%. However, the issue of mail-in voting exposed stark partisan differences. About 80% of Republicans believe that increased mail-in voting will result in widespread fraud versus 79% who disagree. Yes, and where's the chain of custody for these mail-in ballots? QAnon. Wow. The elite really seems, almost terrified, actually, that the QAnon, oh man, we got to do something about that QAnon. And apparently, according to the Washington Post, it's tearing families apart, tearing them apart. There was a time not long ago when the letter held no special meaning for Jacob, a 24-year-old in Croatia. The 17th letter of the alphabet, usually followed by Q in English words. Thank you for reintroducing us to the letter Q. What else was there to know? He certainly never expected to end the tight-knit relationship he shared with his mother. But Jacob, who grew up in the United States, told the Washington Post that he has cut all contact with his mother now, that she's become an ardent believer of the QAnon conspiracy theories. Though they've always had political beliefs, they had a really, really strong relationship, he said. We were inseparable. He had no reason to think anything had changed. But during the holidays in 2019, our relationship just completely tanked. QAnon can be traced back to a series of 2017 posts on 4chan, the online message board known for its mixture of trolls and alt-right followers. The poster was someone named Q, who claimed to be a government insider with Q security clearance, the highest level in the Department of Energy. QAnon's origin matters less than what it's become. an umbrella term for a loose set of conspiracy theories ranging from the false claim that vaccines cause illness. That is not a false claim. It is not a false claim. I suppose the question will be, how much illness do viruses cause? But viruses cause illness because they're giving you disease. And that are a method of controlling the masses, to the bogus assertion that many pop stars and Democratic leaders are pedophiles. Bogus? Is it? As far as the pop stars go, not so sure about that. Not so sure at all. The choose-your-own adventure nature of QAnon makes it compelling to vulnerable people desperate for a sense of security, and difficult for Twitter and Facebook to control, despite their efforts. It's becoming increasingly mainstream to several QAnon-friendly candidates from congressional primaries. And the FBI has warned that it could very likely motivate some domestic extremists to commit criminal, sometimes violent, activity. Yeah, and Jeffrey Epstein killed himself, right? If you look at what happened there, the most famous, the most infamous prisoner in the American penal system, he ends up dead. Yeah. Oh, yeah. They weren't looking at their cameras. They just sort of forgot about him, despite him having been on suicide watch. As QAnon has crept into the news, it's become a testament to our age of political disinformation, not to mention easy online comedic currency. But what's often forgotten in stories and jokes are the people behind the scenes who are baffled at a loved one's embrace of the movement and who struggle to keep it from tearing their families apart. As far as pedophiles in high places go, Sir Jimmy Savile, was a pedophile. And he ran amok for decades. He was given 2 hospitals to run. He was a very close friend of Prince Charles and of Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher. And who knew about Jimmy Savile? Lots and lots of people. The police all knew, but he was protected for decades. Let's look at Belgium. A pedophile, Marc Dutroux, he's pretty much in charge of Belgium for several years. So I'm sorry, I just, conspiracy theories. Oh, you mean there's not evil people out there seeking to mold the world for their evil ends? Yeah, there are, actually. Let's see. According to Jacob's recollection, his mother spent her days browsing these various theories on YouTube and Twitter. I told her I came to visit you, he recalled, but she refused to stay online. I finally got her to turn her phone off once, and it was unreal. She treated it like a chore. It's like she's addicted. It feels like she's been swallowed up by a cult. Finally, I realized that my relationship with her had brought me nothing but stress and unhappiness for, at that point, really years. The smart, awesome person that I used to know just didn't exist anymore, so I decided to cut my losses and cauterize the wound. Yes, it sounds like a sad story, but there's all sorts of things people get addicted to on the internet. Oh, I don't know, like TikTok, say. But I don't know. All of this attention devoted to QAnon, I mean, it suggests to me that the people writing these stories, the people commissioning and editing these stories, are terrified that it's true. Maybe not all of it, but a significant amount of it. Greta Thunberg, she's back in the news. She's still protesting. Piece on Forbes a couple of days ago. LinkedIn. Someone at LinkedIn, they linked to a TED Talk from 2018 featuring Greta talking about climate change. The video has racked up over 5 million views and counting so far. Sadly, while the Nobel Prize nominee didn't win this week, she stayed in the spotlight since her famous "How dare you" speech at the UN and is very active on Twitter. In the talk, Thunberg explains how she struggled with mental illness and mentions her ongoing school strike. It predates the UN appearance by only a month. The climate crisis has already been solved. We already have all the facts and solutions. All we have to do is wake up and change, she says in the talk. In a hat tip to Thunberg, and the Nobel Prize TED posted a link to the video. There's a tagline about needing action, not hope, to fight climate change. Everything seems fairly straightforward. Another day, another reminder about the ills of the world and what we can do to stop them. Reading through the comments makes you wonder if mankind is in the stinker, however. That's an ugly sentence. Absolute morons, reads one. Brainwashed, reads another. Many of the posts call Thunberg out because she has handlers and for being overly scripted. That's a little odd, considering every TED Talk is highly scripted. Several go much further than that, criticizing her age, her gender, and much more. Okay, so here you have this young woman from Sweden who, let's say, I have to be careful here, has issues, which she has talked about. Essentially, she's saying that the world economy as we know it must be destroyed. But this fellow at Forbes, he seems to be, he's upset or confused or actually bemused, nonplussed, that why would people be angry with Greta Thunberg? And of course, yeah, what was she, like 14, 15 years old when she started this out? Why do I want to take advice from a 14-year-old about anything? Let's take a look at the chat here. More talk about masks. Yes, terrified of COVID. Joe Biden supporters are. Yeah. Oh, persona. What? Calm down, Donald. I'm trying to enjoy KMG's commentary, says Tom Anderson. Oh, there's some fighting here between Tom Anderson and Donald Robertson. I'd rather Greta Van Fleet were in the news. Oh, okay. Tom Anderson is blackpilling. Okay, I get it. Hillary was always within the margin of error. Biden is solidly outside it. That depends. I don't think that Biden is going to win. I really don't think so. There's no enthusiasm for him at all. Spending good after bad money is a political thing. LOL. Looks like Kevin had a great Thanksgiving. Yeah, I always get confused about that because, of course, America has its own Thanksgiving, which is in November, near the end of November. Ours, well, is early in October. And I remember SCTV had fun with this, that they had the CanFacts, was the National Bureau of Canadian Facts, that America has Thanksgiving. You know, this was Andrea Martin. But Canada has Thanksgiving, too. Our Thanksgiving comes first, so that makes it better. Did you know it? It's fact. So, no, it kind of, I don't know, kind of passes me by in that regard. It was Thanksgiving? Oh, I thought it was Columbus Day. Which Columbus Day, again, very controversial for Joe Biden in any event. Let's see, from lockdown skeptics, Toby Young, Boris lays waste to the north. As expected, Boris Johnson announced his 3-tier lockdown in the House of Commons this afternoon and then later at a Downing Street press briefing. It wasn't a fully fledged second lockdown throughout England, just a fully fledged second lockdown in parts of northern England, with Liverpool paying the heaviest price so far. Russ Clark in The Telegraph sums it up. Due to a printing error in last year's Conservative manifesto, a rogue word up appeared. When Boris and his team wrote that they wanted to level up the North, they really meant that they simply wanted to level the North. That is, to reduce its economy to a smoldering ruin in a way that not even the closures of mines and other heavy industry achieved in the 1980s. It is the only way I can think to explain the bewildering gap between stated government ambition and the reality. Clark goes on to point out that it's the double standards underlying the northern lockdown that will really stick in voters' craws. It's true that infection rates in many northern districts are currently much higher than in London and the southeast, but here's the thing. Back in the spring, when the reverse was true, the whole country was made to lock down together. Now the North is being singled out for punishment. It's hard to escape the conclusion that for all its blue wall seats, the government finds it politically easier to lock down parts of the North than it does the South. For several weeks in August, the Prime Minister appeared to base his whole COVID policy on saving central London's sandwich bars. And now he thinks nothing of consigning pubs in Newcastle to oblivion. And oblivion it really will be for many. No business can operate in the stop-start, fickle regulatory environment which is currently being imposed. I've considered for a number of years that looking at Western countries, which is the likeliest to collapse? Who will collapse first? And I thought Britain is the likeliest candidate for all sorts of reasons. One being the absolute contempt, sneering contempt that the elite in Britain, how it looks at its citizens, and how it prioritizes non-citizens to citizens, to give one example. But the people of Britain, are they just going to stand back and let Boris Johnson literally destroy the country? Is that what's going to happen? Because I don't know. This seems to me could be what they call a pre-revolutionary situation. Yes, they have the new rules, simplified rules, medium level, tier 1, high level, tier 2, very high level, tier 3. Yeah, we hear about tiers. We hear a lot about epidemiologists. Charles Walker, MP, the vice chair of the 1922 committee, gave an excellent interview to Evan Davis on Radio 4 yesterday, in which he calmly and methodically set out the case against the measures the government announced today. His quote was one of the highlights. Is your view that the first lockdown was a mistake? Walker says we should have learned the lessons of the first lockdown, and the lessons of the first lockdown are this: that this virus particularly targets people with underlying health conditions and the elderly. So what we should be doing is applying the lessons learned by the first lockdown, and it does seem that we're not. Evan Davis says, so it's basically the shelter the elderly policy and those with underlying conditions. Walker says, if the elderly want to be sheltered. There are many people who are elderly who believe that existing isn't living. That being told you've got to spend the next 6 or 12 months without human contact, without seeing the people that you love, without embracing your grandchildren is a price too high for them. It does seem that this government, for the best of reasons, but mistakenly, is trying to abolish death. You can't abolish death. The fact of the matter is that people in their 80s and 90s die. If that comes as news to your listeners or they're offended by that statement, they haven't been paying close attention. The only guarantee you have, as if you're born, is that when you get to your 80s and 90s, the chances are at some stage in your 80s or 90s, you are going to die. We can't save every life. We just can't save every life because the cost to the living is too high. The cost to those people who are not being treated for heart disease or cancer in the 30s, 40s, or 50s is too high. Yeah, abolishing death. I don't think that's much an exaggeration, really. So what's life in a university, at uni in England now? Well, a report from Charlotte Kirkham, who's at Keele, and she surveyed 38 first-year students. Let's see. You can't socialize in person outside your bubble unless it's socially distanced with 6 people. If you had uttered that statement, that sentence last year, people would have thought you were a lunatic. You can't socialize in person outside your bubble unless it's socially distanced with 6 people. Being a commuter student who can't meet anyone in person, no freshers, cancel social events and opportunities, no parties, clubs, or nights out, fear of repercussions, online lectures stopping you, meet people you sit next to, there's no chatter or opportunity to stop for a quick chat afterwards, scared of the virus, everyone's in their own rooms, everything shuts at 10 p.m. The student union and other large social places are restricted, and the one-way system means you can't walk up and talk to people. They're still doing that one-way thing, huh? Okay, because it's kind of ended here. The arrows are still on the floors, but no one is paying attention any longer, at least where I live. Let's check in with Alex Berenson. 750 million people have been infected with and recovered from the row this year, per World Health Organization. We are still counting proven reinfections individually. Let me help with the math. We now know how common this reinfections will be, not very, but the idea makes for hot panic porn. Let's see, a British member of parliament resigns from the government over lockdowns. I now believe that the attempted cure is worse than the disease. Adam Firestein says, I don't practice emergency medicine, so why is Jeremy Faust practicing journalism? Berenson says, because he's not very good at epidemiology. Yes, and this is a worry for me. By the way, the AstraZeneca U.S. vaccine trial, which was put on temporary hold as of September the 6th, still seems to be in limbo in the U.S. This is the most recent story I can find from October the 6th. Warp speed. Maybe trying to rush a vaccine wasn't the best idea. Johnson & Johnson. So this would be the second big SARS-CoV vaccine trial that's had to suspend enrollment because of an unexplained illness. With its remarkable commitment to transparency, Johnson & Johnson offered no other details. Yeah, you don't want to rush a vaccine. You just don't want to do that. But I don't know. Trump has certainly bought into this. I think it's a mistake, but there's not enough time left here with the elections. The election is on November the 3rd, and it's now October the 13th. So I don't think it's going to make any difference electorally. I wanted to talk about how our language has devolved into gibberish, particularly amongst our elite, the educated, the woke people, the SJWs. Steve Saylor was amused by an essay from the New York Times Book Review called Are Straight People Okay? And Other Questions About Love and Sexuality by Haley Molotek, who is a young woman. Ward distinguishes straightness as a practice from straight culture, which is the very heart of society's most disgraceful failures. It is not, as one popular joke goes, that straight people are not okay. It's that heteronormativity creates a powerful, privileged form of sexuality against which, historically and currently, all other forms are compared. In examining the pressure to partner with the opposite gender, we find the extortions of capitalism, the misogyny of violence against women, the racist and xenophobic erasure of non-white families, and the homophobic hatreds that pervade so much of everyday life. I'm really tempted to go up to this woman and say, come on, knock it off, okay? First of all, no one even knows what these words mean or the way that you constructed them. What are you trying to say here? Are you determined to demonstrate just what an ally you are to the non-gender binary, or whatever they're calling them these days? So I did some research into this woman, Haley Molotek, and she is an editor, publisher, but and this took me to The Guardian, where every woman is crazy. So let's talk about talking about yourself, okay? You can't get much more meta than that. This is from 5 years ago, but still relevant. The first person essays boom, top editors on why confessional writing matters. A Slate piece on first person writing has prompted debate in the digital media community. We asked editors at BuzzFeed, Jezebel, and other leading sites to weigh in on the importance of such pieces and why there is a gender divide. On Monday, Laura Bennett's Slate piece on the boom of first-person essay writing sparked a fierce debate online between editors and writers. How can one best work between the vulnerability of a writer and the traffic goal of an editor? What's the line between publishing someone's personal experience and exploitation? In response to Bennett's piece, we asked senior editors at several publications known for publishing first-person stories about what they value in them, how they look after their writers, and why is it that so many confessional stories seem to be written by women and not men? Golly, that's a mystery. That is a mystery. So Dory Schaefer, ideas editor at BuzzFeed, says it's a mischaracterization to say that first-person essays have traditionally been written by women. A quick glance at Philip Lopate's canonical anthology, The Art of the Personal Essay, should dispel that myth. But the internet's democratization of voices, allowing writers, particularly women and writers of color, access to platforms and audiences previously unavailable to them, and the ability to tell their own stories, has led to anxiety among some gatekeepers of culture. So when I assign essays like Jennifer Chen's Why I Didn't Want My Miscarriage to Stay Secret, I think that's, if one were to come up with a generic Guardianista headline, that would be it. Why I Didn't Want My Miscarriage to Stay Secret, or Kristen Shariko's My Boyfriend Loves Fat Women, both of which are incredibly thoughtful, smart explorations by women of formerly taboo subjects. I'm also thinking about how I can give people access to the huge platform that BuzzFeed offers. I don't keep track of the gender breakdown of our personal essay pitches. I'm more thinking about whether the writer is telling a compelling stories that we haven't heard before, and or telling a story in a unique voice or with a perspective we haven't heard before. Okay, and let's find out what an angry Black woman has to say. Latoya Peterson. We are not interested in people searching for meaning in their navels. There are plenty of other life experiences to explore that do not get enough attention. This overshared, gross-out phenomenon of first-person writing is generally a door that leads to more fame and work for white women. So her complaint is not so much that writers are just spilling every detail. It seems to be that once again, the Black woman is getting the wrong end of the stick. It is what Push by Sapphire? That's a thing, right? Wasn't that made into a movie with this morbidly obese African woman that everyone pretended to weep about? Let's see. The route to publication and book movie deals simply is not open for non-white women. No? Really? Society sees women of color shameless writing as proof of deviance, not a relatable and fun story to share on social media. The backlash, when we do open up in that way, is normally immediate and often includes a quitter referendum and how we are failing the race. I may have missed it, but I can't think of a woman of color who became the belle of the literary ball by simply writing about her sexual transgressions. The closest piece I can think of in recent years is Helena Andrew Dyer's Bitch is the New Black. But the lingering notes from that work are not sexual, but rather about friendship and hollowness and the vulnerability of Black women. We always have to bring more to the table. Yes, you have to work 4 times as hard, 8. Where are the men is also an interesting question. Men write these kinds of pieces all the time. They aren't just seen in the same marginalizing light. A man writing about his drug addiction or squandered nights in sweaty sheets is just considered normal, interesting, literary. Tom Chiarella wrote about being sexually abused by a teacher for Esquire, but the piece wasn't framed as a gross-out confessional piece. It was given the consideration it deserved. For some reason, the lives of men are inherently more serious affairs than the lives of women. I often think about Katha Pollitt's Learning to Drive. I think it's being made into a movie. You can just feel the jealousy here. I remember the shock in some corners of the internet that a thinking woman like Pollitt would actually be subject to the same human struggles as the rest of it. I mean, yes, okay. Let's see. What does this woman have to say? Her 3 previous essay collections as Catholic Polyp gathered brilliant commentary on welfare, abortion, surrogate motherhood, Iraq, gay marriage, and healthcare, mostly from the pages of The Nation. But with Learning to Drive, she gets personal and shameless. She has decided to wave her dirty laundry, amongst which she found some unidentified striped panties, and confesses to web stalking her longtime live-in womanizing former boyfriend. Take that, you rat. It's hard to tell if she's coming into her own, trying to sell more books, or has lost it entirely. Or perhaps she's giving up her dignity in a generous motion of solidarity towards the rest of us who have already blown our cover. Okay. Is it time to speak about Megan Thee Stallion? I think so. I think so. Because she's an important woman. And you know what she's writing about? She's writing about Black women. And that Black women are ignored. Megan Thee Stallion, why I speak up for Black women. I'm not afraid of criticism, and protect Black women should not be controversial. Wow. She's described as an entertainer, philanthropist, and entrepreneur. In the weeks leading up to the election, Black women are expected once again to deliver victory for Democratic candidates. We have gone from being unable to vote legally to a highly courted voting bloc, all in a little more than a century. Despite this, and despite the way so many have embraced messages about racial justice this year, Black women are still constantly disrespected and disregarded in so many areas of life. I was recently the victim of an act of violence by a man. After a party, I was shot twice as I walked away from him. We were not in a relationship. Truthfully, I was shocked that I ended up in that place. You hang out with a rapper and you're shocked that you get shot? Really? Tory Lanez, aka Argentina Fargo. He's a Canadian fellow, although now resident in the United States. And I just want to go back to this part in Wikipedia about Tory Lanez and why this demonstrates that he's one of the stupidest men alive. Okay, I kind of wonder how he can actually manage to tie his shoes without strangling himself. So, yeah, his name obviously, supposedly his name is Daystar Shmuel Shua Peterson. I'm having a hard time believing that. Okay, so, but let's get some insight into him. I ended up moving downtown with these 3 dudes that I didn't really know. I came into the house and didn't realize how things worked. From like 15 to 18, I was just fighting them. It was every man for himself. That's what made me a man. Having to fend for myself and being in a situation where there is no dad, no grandma, and no mom to help you. It changed the person that I am today. He then once again started rapping before giving himself a nickname. Notorious, which is a reference to the late Notorious B.I.G., whom he idolized, and adopted his new moniker, Tory Lanez. At the age of 16, Daystar dropped out of the 10th grade, and he would begin performing songs at the outdoor concerts. At the age of 17, Daystar began singing, which he found an interest in. However, he had never received any vocal training. Daystar also goes by the name Argentina Fargo. In an interview, he said, "When I put foreign and banking together, it's like foreign money. I'm a Canadian dude walking around America. When you look at me, it's like looking at foreign money. So I call myself Argentina Fargo, like foreign money." I don't know. Megan Thee Stallion, she's now published in the New York Times. Perhaps, you know, she could find a better class of a boyfriend. My initial silence about what happened was out of fear for myself and my friends. And she's talking about being shot by Tory Lanez twice in the foot. Even as a victim, I've been met with skepticism and judgment. The way people have publicly questioned and debated whether I played a role in my own violent assault proves that my fears about discussing what happened were, unfortunately, warranted. You're not naming the man who shot you? Did you actually speak to the police? about this? Because I've heard that she hasn't, because snitches get stitches. After a lot of self-reflection on that incident, I've realized that violence against women is not always connected to being in a relationship. Instead, it happens because too many men treat all women as objects, which helps them justify inflicting abuse against us when we choose to exercise our own free will. There was a Kardashian in that car when this happened. Did you know that? Yeah, there was a Kardashian there. Good things always go with the Kardashians. From the moment we begin to navigate the intricacies of adolescence, we feel the weight of this threat and the weight of contradictory expectations and misguided preconceptions. Many of us begin to put too much value on how we are seen by others. That's if we are seen at all. Oh, just give it a rest. The issue is even more intense for Black women who struggle against stereotypes and are seen as angry or threatening. When we try to stand up for ourselves and our sisters, there's not much room for passionate advocacy if you are a Black woman. I recently used the stage at Saturday Night Live to harshly rebuke Kentucky's Attorney General Daniel Cameron for his appalling conduct in denying Breonna Taylor and her family justice. I anticipated some backlash. Anyone who follows the lead of Congressman John Lewis, the late civil rights giant, and makes good trouble, necessary trouble, runs the risk of being attacked by those comfortable with the status quo. But you know what? I'm not afraid of criticism. We live in a country where we have the freedom to criticize elected officials. And it's ridiculous that some people think the simple phrase, protect Black women, is controversial. Where did this come from? First of all, the phrase, protect Black women, and because you can't say that because everyone wants to do the opposite of that. We deserve to be protected as human beings, and we are entitled to our anger about a laundry list of mistreatment and neglect that we suffer. Again, I'm going to suggest that given what we know about how Black women in the music business are treated by their rapper boyfriends, perhaps if you wanted to, avoid abuse, unnecessary pain or whatever, you could find partners who are not rappers. Maternal mortality rates for Black mothers are about 3 times higher than those for white mothers, an obvious sign of racial bias in healthcare. In 2019, an astronomical 91% of the transgender or gender nonconforming people who were fatally shot were Black, according to the Human Rights Campaign. Beyond threats to our health and lives, we confront so much judgment and so many conflicting messages on a daily basis. If we dress in fitted clothing, our curves become a topic of conversation, not only on social media, but also in the workplace. The fact that Serena Williams, the greatest athlete in any sport ever, had to defend herself for wearing a bodysuit at the 2018 French Open is proof positive with how misguided the obsession with Black women's bodies is. First, you're telling us that you're ignored. Now you're telling us that everyone is obsessed with Black women's bodies. No, it's not true. Simply not true. I would know. I've received quite a bit of attention for appearance as well as my talent. You're a twerker. That's what you are. You twerk. I choose my own clothing. Let me repeat, I choose what I wear, not because I'm trying to appeal to men. No, perish the thought. But because I'm showing pride in my appearance. Yes, the twerking. Yes, that's a very positive body image. The twerking is central to who I am as a woman and a performer. I value compliments from women far more than from men. I bet you do. But the remarks about how I choose to present myself have often been judgmental and cruel, with many assuming that I'm dressing and performing for the male gaze. When women choose to capitalize on our sexuality, reclaim our own power, like I have, we are vilified and disrespected. And yes, and sometimes when you hang around with a goofball who calls himself Argentina Fargo, you get shot. In every industry, women are pitted against one another, but especially in hip-hop, where it seems as if the male-dominated ecosystem can handle only one female rapper at a time. Countless times, people have tried to pit me against Nicki Minaj and Cardi B, 2 incredible entertainers and strong women. Nicki Minaj and Cardi B, their husbands, they are real pieces of work. Those two. Um, yeah, again, they're looking at all the wrong places. Wouldn't it be nice if black girls weren't inundated with negative sexist comments of black women? I think that if you're going to twerk, you're going to make your act pretty much about twerking. I think you're going to be inundated with negative sexist comments about black women. If they were told instead of the many important things that we've achieved, it took a major motion picture, Hidden Figures, to introduce the world to the NASA research mathematician, Katherine Johnson. Yeah, it's a completely made up story. And it's important to note that six of the Little Rock Nine students whose bravery in 1957 led to school integration were black girls. I wish that every little black girl was taught that the Black Lives Matter movement was co-founded by Patrisse Cullors, Alicia Garza, and Opal Tometi. And then she talks about Shirley Chisholm, Loretta Lynch, Maxine Waters, Carol Moseley Braun. Can't you do better than that? And Kamala Harris's candidacy, yes, it will take time, and black women are not naive. I would suggest that many of them are. Otherwise, they wouldn't end up with men called Tory Lanes. We know that after the last ballot is cast and the vote is tallied, we are likely to go back to fighting to ourselves, because at least for now, that's all we have. She certainly seems put upon. Isn't she Thee Stallion? She's a put upon stallion. Yes. Okay. Amy Coney Barrett went to my all-girls high school. I hope she's not confirmed. This is again from The Guardian by Lisa M. O'Neill. And I don't know, this woman seems, she starts out talking normally. Okay. But then the further this essay goes, it just falls apart and it becomes berserk, actually. It's, yes. And let's, yes, they both went to the Catholic University of America. But then she found out there's a problem with reproductive rights. It's been brought home to me. We've been told now that apparently you don't have to be a woman to have children. So I guess that abortion is not a women's issue anymore. Let's see. Over time, I recognized that my belief in the rightness of my faith had made me think that someone else's health and reproductive freedom should be legislated. This is a phony argument. Joe Sobran pointed out decades ago that if some woman announced that she was going to perform like Frankensteinian experiments on the baby inside her womb, that would be shut down immediately. It would not be allowed. No, people do not have total control of their own bodies. Further, I saw how the church's patriarchal culture, even more rigid in charismatic communities, harmed the lives of girls and women when we were discouraged from any agencies around our own bodies, sexuality, and life choices. I saw how in the absence of talk of abortion, people who claim to be pro-life often do not care about the lives of the most vulnerable Americans, including children born into poverty and struggle. I worry about the lives of alphabet people families when Barrett defunded Supreme Court dissenters on the landmark marriage equality case, Obergefell versus Hodges. I worry about the lives of Black, Native, Asian, and Latinx Americans when Barrett has pointed out what she perceives as flaws in Brown versus Board of Education. I worry about the lives of transgender youth and adults when in lectures Barrett stated that she did not know if transgender bathrooms were necessary given the text of Title IX, and when she misgendered trans women, calling them physiological males. Yeah. I don't, is it possible to get along with these people when it's difficult? Not impossible to understand what they're actually saying or trying to say? Or is it simply a question of them saying, we're in charge? And so we get to mangle. We get to mangle language in any way we choose, and we're going to force you to. Hey, we are going to put Megan Thee Stallion on the op-ed page of the New York Times. Formerly highly respected newspaper, the paper of record. Megan Thee Stallion, according to the Daily Mail, has called Kentucky's black attorney general a sellout Negro. Dangerously close to hate speech, is it not? Again from the Mail, Lizzo sizzles in sexy Uncle Sam costume as she rallies fans to vote 21 days ahead of the U.S. election. And what do you guess that Lizzo is doing in this video? Yep, twerking. You have, oh my God, this is just so sickening. It's just, should have spoiled that stuff. But here we are being gaslighted that, ooh, yeah, Lizzo, she is just so, no, she's not. Nope. Take a look at the chat here. Don from Beyond, our friend, got to the rally 5 hours early in order to get that special seat behind Trump's podium. Whitey says, nice, I've never been to one. I think that I would enjoy it. Waiting 5 hours, that is devotion. I'm not going to wait 5 hours for anything. Matt Beck says the COVID-19 scare was brought to you by the same man who brought you COVID-96, a.k.a. mad cow disease. Yes, the infamous Neil Ferguson of Imperial College London, who has been spectacularly wrong about so many things. Donald Robertson says, I can't believe ACB wore such a hot dress to the confirmation hearings. Was she trying to make the two Scottish cows jealous? Maybe drive Thomas and Kavanaugh wild? She is in remarkably good shape for a 47-year-old woman who was given birth to 5 children. YT says that Lizzo was absolutely grotesque and disgusting, a perversion of everything good and beautiful. You're forgetting to drink your tea. No, I've had some of it. Kevin, can you recommend a good bio of de Gaulle? I can't off the top of my head, actually. Alistair Horn is very good on China. Not China, France, actually. I don't know whether he has written a book, a biography devoted to de Gaulle. Well, let's take a quick look here and find out. He died 3 years ago. I talked about A Savage War of Peace, Algeria, 1954 to 1962, and he wrote The Price of Glory, Verdun, 1916. He wrote a great book about the Paris Commune, the fall of Paris, and then he wrote about the fall of France in 1940. He wrote a military biography of Napoleon and a biography, 2-volume biography of Harold Macmillan. Yeah, there doesn't seem to be one here directly. I'll have to look into this. Debbie Donsky, Ed D. She is the superintendent of education for the Toronto District School Board. Oh, and she gives TED Talks, because of course she does. She describes herself as mommy, writer, creator, teacher, learner, decolonized leadership, keeper of memory. If I were dictator, one of the very first things that I would do would be to close the education departments of every university in my country, the world, if I could get away with it. It's just nothing good. Nothing good comes out of this, except gibberish. Let's see. 4 big questions about racial justice in education, part 3. 4 questions we will engage in will include October 15th, Paul, what's the difference between a non-racist school district board and an anti-racist school district board? October 22nd, Pam, what are the ways special education continues to reinforce and uphold white supremacy? October 29th, Kiki, I think it's Kiki. What mechanisms and processes should be in place within a board that recognizes its systemic racism? November 5th, Deb. What are the formal and informal ways in which coaching and mentorships uphold white supremacy in school systems. It is just absolute gibberish. Oh, and she's keen on a book called Decolonizing Education. The initial educational struggle for Indigenous educators has been to sensitize the Eurocentric consciousness in general, and educators in particular, to the colonial and neo-colonial practices that come to marginalize and racialize Indigenous students, because Indians had no racial identity before white men showed up. Is that what we're supposed to believe? This does not come easily to Eurocentrically educated Canadians, for it requires their unlearning as well. Ooh. Challenging their conscious and subconscious notions of meritocracy and superiority learned in life, with sometimes well-intentioned but biased parents, grandparents, media, community, school text, and discussions on how privilege is constructed and maintained in a racist society. I don't know. Apparently, we can't live together anymore. Apparently, that's just no longer on the cards. But amidst chaos and criticism, what has been lost is an appreciation for the logistical miracle currently being performed by schools in this province. Oh, and here's a complaint from Nora Hindi. Before we congratulate ourselves for being progressive and progressing women's rights internationally, remember girls like my daughter across the border in Quebec cannot become public servants due to her choice of clothing. That's a shame. That is a terrible shame. Oh, and here's just one more example of gibberish here. This is something tweeted to Radical Body Love. How we treat difference and explain it to children can either reinforce the notions of body-based hierarchies or dismantle them. When we explore our assumptions about the bodies of others, we are better able to see where our defaults hinder the full range of human identity. How long does it take to learn how to speak like that? You just, osmosis, you just pick it up that way? Or is, rigorous training required? Okay, we already talked about that. What else we got here? What else do we got here? Oh, yes, Portland. In Portland, statues of Abraham Lincoln and Benjamin Franklin were pulled down because I guess this is a war against the past more than anything else. I'm looking at a picture of Billie Eilish here, and she's actually wearing clothes like a normal person. I guess the greenness of her hair points out just how pale she is. Police declare riot in Portland. Group of protesters toppled statues of former presidents Roosevelt, Lincoln, and shattered the entrance to the Oregon Historical Society in Portland's South Park blocks late Sunday, before moving into other areas of downtown, smashing storefronts and engaging in other acts of destruction. Protest organizers had promoted the event on social media as an Indigenous Peoples' Day of Rage. Monday is the federally observed holiday of Columbus Day, but many states and cities now recognize the day instead as Indigenous Peoples' Day over concerns that Christopher Columbus's arrival in the Americas helped blot centuries of violence against Indigenous populations. A story from the New York Post from 3 days ago. Bands of shoplifters are terrorizing Soho's high-end boutiques, lifting hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of designer merchandise, and in some cases, threatening security guards to keep quiet or be labeled racist, the Post has learned. Yes, today I'm not going to get arrested today. Nope, you can't arrest me without my permission. The disturbing pattern began in late May during the riots that rocked the city in the wake of the George Floyd police custody death. High-end Celine was looted of $1.5 million in merchandise then, and the blatant thievery continues every week in ritzy stores such as Prada, Moncler, Dior, and Balenciaga, one plugged-in local said. This is happening every week. Walk around Soho on Worcester Street and Green Street, Mercer Street. You have huge bouncers out there trying to deter hit-and-run activity, the source, a restaurateur, said. But in some cases, the thieves are given carte blanche to steal. If the store personnel stop them and say anything in the store before they left the building, then it gets turned into a racial accusation. The brands tell their employees to walk away. They don't want to be the next Instagram video claiming they are a racist brand. Soho store managers, especially those employed by national retailers, remain tight-lipped for fear of an R-word reprisal, bad publicity, or tarnishing their brand, the source said. New York Police Department Sergeant Joseph Imperatrice, founder of Blue Lives Matter at New York City, told the Post that investigators are aware that mobs of young transient groups have bulldozed through aisles, grabbing as much as their arms can hold. A law enforcement source confirmed that dozens of larcenies have occurred in recent months in high-end establishments in the neighborhood. The source said the victimized stores included Adidas, Fendi, and Burberry. The suspects create a stir and grab as much merchandise as they can, confident they're not going to find resistance or consequences. It's a lucrative business. In the latest incident, thieves twice plundered a Montclair on Prince Street, which sells down jackets for nearly $2,000 on October 1st. In the first incident, two individuals grabbed nearly 24 down jackets, the business person told the Post. A few hours later at 6 p.m., thieves snatched more than $50,000 in merchandise and sped off in a white Jaguar and a black Audi, the law enforcement source said. The restaurateur claims 16 to 20 people were involved in the second incident, and the heist included a lockout. On September 30th, three males entered French label Céline on Worcester Street at about 12:50 p.m. and took more than $37,000 worth of merchandise and fled in a dark Audi with New Jersey plates, the law enforcement source said. Adding those individuals are part of a group now wanted for 12 high-end crimes, 7 in Lower Manhattan and 5 within the confines of the 19th precinct on the Upper East Side. Well, it's not sustainable, is it? It simply isn't. These stores are going to go out of business if they keep being raided in this manner. So they would rather go out of business than be accused of racism, because stealing from stores like Prada and Celine is a form of reparations. Did they think people are buying that? I suppose some are. I don't think very many. Are. Oh, and I guess I'll end up here with I suppose a typically Canadian column on Thanksgiving Day. Will escaping Americans test Canada's capacity for sympathy? This is from Leo Panich. When Donald Trump was elected in 2016, I started hearing from American friends that were thinking of migrating to Canada. And what you didn't say, you're lying, because you don't. You're not even thinking about it. You're just making an ass of yourself. Sensing that most of them didn't really mean it, I would joke in response that we would build a wall and make you pay for it. And I sometimes reminded them that Canada has more often been the refuge for those escaping the overthrow of reactionary regimes. A good many white people in apartheid South Africa used to run to Toronto as to run to. Really? Especially since the already infamous first presidential debate of 2020, where Trump appeared to morph into sounding more like Benito Mussolini than the shyster businessman of the P.T. Barnum, there's a sucker born every minute variety. I've been getting more declarations of intent to migrate to Canada. They seem more sincere and credible this time. Immediately after watching the debate itself, I was impelled to go hunting for my battered old copy of It Can't Happen Here, Sinclair Lewis's Depression-era novel about the coming to power of a fascist president. A passage toward the end, rather foreshadowing Margaret Atwood's ending to The Handmaid's Tale, tells of a dissident journalist who, after escaping a U.S. concentration camp, arrives in Canada, supposing that everyone would thrill to his tale of imprisonment, torture, and escape. But he found that 10,000 spirited tellers of woe had come before him, and that the Canadians, however attentive and generous hosts that they might be, were actively sick of pumping up new sympathy. They felt that their quota of martyrs was completely filled, and as to the exiles who came in penniless, and that was the majority of them, the Canadians became distinctly wary of depriving their own families on behalf of unknown refugees. Sounds pretty racist, Sinclair Lewis, and couldn't even keep up forever a gratification in the presence of celebrated American authors, politicians, scientists, when they become as common as mosquitoes. I don't like that metaphor. Yikes. Oh, Umberto Eco. Observation: the most telling characteristic of the rise of fashion was how its impoverished vocabulary and elementary syntax increasingly limited popular capacities for complex and critical reasoning. You get a lot of complex and critical reasoning when Bill Clinton was talking about whether he wore boxers or briefs on television. The measure of Canadian sympathy for capacity for sympathy may be tested sooner than we think. I don't think this fellow actually knows Americans very well, because for most Americans, the idea of leaving America and moving to Canada is just, it's unthinkable. It's just unthinkable. Okay, let's have a final look at the chat. Okay, yes, the murder of thousands of prime English cattle. Yes, Neil Ferguson. Jackson also has a good book on the fall of France, his Bulgarian horticulture specialist, PhD. Prada bags make good winter wear for 4 black children, says Rustin Shackelford. How is the mayoral candidate winning under these conditions? Are Portlandians that idiotic? I don't know. I think I mentioned this last week when I spoke about this woman, that I thought that there would be, like a centrist candidate who would, run against Ted Wheeler, but instead, nope, just plain out crazy Antifa. What do you think about the Me Too statue in Manhattan of Medusa holding the severed head of Perseus? Oh dear, that's not that kid, is it? Standing in front of the Wall Street Bull? That would be gruesome. Kevin, have you seen Devil's Advocate? Just saw it on Netflix. Is that about a lawyer who sells his soul to the devil? There would seem to be a spate of movies on that theme. When was it? In the 1990s? I'm thinking of one with Al Pacino. He just overacting up a storm. And I think it said Keanu Reeves in it. So let me check here. Is that Keanu Reeves and Al Pacino. And look, Rosemary's Baby, I think, is more to the point. See, John Cassavetes sells his soul and sells his wife out, lovely Mia Farrow, for a job. Just a job. A role on Broadway, right? As far as I recall, in this movie, The Devil's Advocate, basically, Keanu Reeves just said, how about we give you a harem of 100 lingerie models and like $100 trillion and unlimited power? Who's not going to take that deal? But you don't need to offer people that much. That's the show for today. I'll be back on the air tomorrow at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. On Theater Thursday this week, Charlie Kaufman's new film, I'm Thinking of Ending Things. And on the book club, I'm going to be discussing Democracy, the God That Failed by Hans Hermann Hoppe. If you like the show or any part of it, I'd appreciate it if you click on the like button and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you have not done so already. If you'd like to make a donation to this live stream, my PayPal account is kevin_grace@hotmail.com. Once again, kevin_grace@hotmail.com. If you're in Canada, you can send money directly via Interact at kevingrace@shaw.ca. And I will leave you with this. In these days of social atomization and civilizational collapse, I do dearly hope that you, my dear listeners and viewers, manage to form a genuine human connection in order to ease the burden. Good night.